Decades ago, we believed we were completely alone in the universe. Then, an alien armada darkened our skies, offering mere protection from a harsh galaxy in exchange for total, crushing submission. They expected us to kneel. Instead, humanity looked at their outdated weapons, looked at their arrogant demands, and simply chuckled. Deep inside the reinforced concrete bunkers of United States Space Command in Colorado, the first warning signs did not come from a dramatic flash of light, but from a sudden, eerie silence. General William Graves stood before the massive primary tactical display, a steaming cup of black coffee cooling rapidly in his hand. The board, normally lit with the reassuring green trajectories of thousands of commercial and military satellites, was currently bleeding a violent crimson. "Report, Lieutenant," Graves barked, his voice carrying the gravelly weight of 30 years of military service. "What am I looking at? A coronal mass ejection? A solar flare?" "Negative, General," the young analyst replied, her fingers flying across her mechanical keyboard. "It's not a solar event. We are losing telemetry from the entire SpaceX Starlink constellation over the Pacific Rim, and it's not just them. The Northrop Grumman early warning satellites went dark 3 minutes ago. Whatever is up there is physically displacing them. Sir, we have massive gravitational anomalies entering low Earth orbit." Before Graves could issue an order to scramble the rapid response interceptors, the main screen flickered. The tactical map of Earth vanished, replaced by a visual feed that made the breath catch in the throat of every seasoned veteran in the room. Hanging in the black void above the Earth's atmosphere were ships. Dozens of them. They were jagged, asymmetrical monstrosities that looked less like engineered vessels and more like floating metallic mountains. Their hulls were scored with the micrometeorite strikes of deep space, glowing with a sickly, pulsating violet energy that screamed of raw, uncontained radioactive power. The silence in the command center was deafening. Humanity had spent centuries looking up at the stars, wondering if they were alone. In a single, terrifying instant, that question had been answered. 30 seconds later, every television, radio, smartphone, and digital billboard on the planet was hijacked. The Palantir data integration systems in Washington immediately flagged the intrusion, but their cybersecurity countermeasures were simply bypassed. The signal wasn't a sophisticated cyber attack. It was a brute force broadband transmission pushing through on raw, unencrypted radio frequencies. A figure appeared on screens from Times Square to Tokyo. It was humanoid, yet entirely alien. Its skin was a pale, iridescent gray, pulled taut over an angular skull devoid of hair or visible ears. Its eyes were solid pools of liquid obsidian. It wore ceremonial armor adorned with glowing violet insignias. "Inhabitants of Sol 3, the creature spoke, its voice carrying a synthesized, metallic echo that translated perfectly into every native language on Earth. "I am Fleet Master Valdir, of the Raelian Ascendancy. For millennia, you have screamed your presence into the dark cosmos, completely ignorant of the predators that dwell in the shadows." Valdir paused, letting his obsidian eyes stare through the camera, projecting a practiced, chilling authority. "We are here to offer you salvation," Valdir continued. "The galaxy is a chaotic and violent storm. Without our intervention, your primitive civilization will be devoured by neighboring empires within a single of your orbital cycles. We offer you the Aegis of the Ascendancy. We will shield your world. We will protect your skies. In return, you will become a vassal state. You will tithe your resources, submit to our governance, and dismantle your crude military apparatus. You have exactly 72 hours to sign the Treaty of Incorporation. Resistance will result in your immediate categorization as a hostile feral species, followed by planetary sterilization." The broadcast terminated, returning the screens to normal programming, though the world was forever changed. Panic erupted in the streets. Global stock markets plummeted to zero in a matter of seconds. However, inside the Pentagon's subterranean war room, a very different reaction was taking place. Secretary of Defense Rachel Hughes stood at the head of a sprawling obsidian conference table, surrounded by the brightest minds in the military-industrial complex. On the screens behind her, high-resolution optical feeds from surviving Lockheed Martin spy satellites provided a terrifyingly clear view of the Raelian Armada. "Let's skip the existential dread, ladies and gentlemen," Hughes said, her tone razor-sharp. "We have an ultimatum. I need hard data. What are we dealing with?" Dr. Simon Cole, the the lead astrophysicist for DARPA, stood up. He didn't look terrified. He looked profoundly confused. Secretary Hughes, General Graves, Dr. Cole began, tapping a tablet to highlight a thermal scan of the largest alien dreadnought. We've been analyzing their propulsion and energy signatures since they dropped out of whatever faster-than-light travel they use. They are massive, heavily armored, and capable of interstellar travel. But there is something deeply wrong with their technological profile. General Graves leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. "Define wrong, Simon." "It's stagnant," Cole replied, projecting a series of graphs onto the main display. "Look at their heat dissipation. It's horribly inefficient. They are bleeding thermal energy into space like a Victorian-era steam engine. Furthermore, when they hacked our global comms, they didn't use a quantum decryption algorithm. They blasted a raw, unencrypted analog signal at such a high wattage that it simply overpowered our local towers. It's brute force. It lacks any kind of sophistication." A representative from Raytheon, sitting near the back, cleared his throat. "Dr. Cole is right. We've been running simulations on their visible defensive arrays. They have what appears to be magnetic shielding, meant to deflect superheated plasma. But it operates on a fixed frequency. We don't think it can stop high-velocity, non-magnetic kinetic impacts. In fact, if we fired a standard tungsten rod from an orbital railgun at that ship, the shield might not even register it as a threat until it breached the hull." Silence fell over the war room as the implication sank in. Hughes crossed her arms. "Are you telling me that an alien armada capable of crossing the galaxy has worse point defense systems than an Aegis destroyer?" "I'm telling you, Madam Secretary," Cole said softly, "that they haven't fought a peer-to-peer war in centuries. They rely on the sheer intimidation of their size and their FTL capabilities. Because humanity hasn't cracked FTL, we've spent the last 100 years perfecting the art of killing each other on a single, isolated rock. We are a crucible species. They are complacent." Graves cracked a slow, dangerous smile. "They want us to dismantle our military. They think we're helpless." "And what do we do, General?" Hughes asked, her eyes glinting with a dangerous realization. "We lie," Graves said softly. "We play the terrified primitives. We give them exactly what they expect to see, while we quietly load the shotgun under the table." Over the next 48 hours, Earth put on the greatest theatrical performance in the history of the galaxy. Publicly, global leaders projected a front of terrified compliance. The United Nations General Assembly convened in a highly publicized, tear-filled emergency session, passing resolutions to accept the Raelian Ascendancy's terms. News anchors wept on live television, mourning the end of human sovereignty. Military bases across the globe purposefully shut down their primary radar arrays, broadcasting their disarmament in plain, unencrypted channels for the alien fleet to intercept. But in the shadows, humanity's true nature was baring its fangs. Deep beneath the Nevada desert, the top-secret Project Zeus was accelerated from a theoretical testing phase into full-scale operational readiness. Engineers from Boeing, Anduril Industries, and Lockheed Martin worked relentlessly, fueled by amphetamines and a potent cocktail of fear and defiance. Project Zeus was a relic of Cold War paranoia, updated for the 21st century, a network of stealth satellites armed with dense, telephone pole-sized tungsten rods, dropped from orbit. These rods from God required no explosives. They utilized simple gravity, striking targets with the kinetic energy of a tactical nuclear weapon, but without the radioactive fallout. To the Raelians, the Zeus satellites looked like harmless, inactive space debris. They didn't emit radiation. They didn't broadcast plasma signatures. They were just cold, dead metal floating in the void. Meanwhile, inside the highly secure bunkers of Fort Meade, United States Cyber Command was having a field day. Because the Raelians relied on analog broadcast frequencies and possessed no understanding of modern human polymorphic encryption, human hackers were currently slipping into the alien fleet's internal network like ghosts. "It's almost insulting," a senior Palantir data engineer reported to General Graves via a secure, hardwired subterranean line. "They have no firewalls, no multi-factor authentication. Their entire military hierarchy is built on an honor system. We're currently reading Fleet Master Valdir's personal correspondence. General, you're going to want to see this." Graves read the translated documents that poured from the dot matrix printer. They kept it old school to avoid any potential alien wireless snooping. His face darkened. The Ascendancy had no intention of merely protecting Earth. The documents outlined a standard integration procedure. First, they would establish a planetary governor. Then, they would begin the cull. According to Raelian doctrine, the human population of 8 billion was unsustainable and posed a long-term risk of rebellion. The treaty Valdir was bringing to Earth included a hidden, non-negotiable clause: the systematic extermination of 4 billion humans, followed by the strip mining of Earth's freshwater oceans to fuel their fleet's inefficient cooling systems. Graves slammed his fist onto the metal desk, leaving a slight dent. "They don't want a vassal state," Graves growled to Hughes, who was standing beside him reading the same document. "They want a slaughterhouse." "Let them try," Hughes replied, her voice cold as liquid nitrogen. "Is the grid ready?" "SpaceX completed the final stealth payload launch 3 hours ago," Graves confirmed. "We have 600 kinetic penetrators locked onto the coordinates of their armada. Furthermore, our nuclear submarines have gone completely dark, submerged deep in the Marianas and the Arctic. The alien sensors can't penetrate more than 100 meters of seawater. They think our oceans are empty." "Good." Hughes adjusted her suit jacket, checking her reflection in the darkened glass of the command center. "Then, it's time to welcome our new overlords." The deadline arrived. At the exact 72-hour mark, a massive Raelian dropship detached from the flagship. It descended through the atmosphere, a brutal, ugly wedge of dark metal that scorched the sky, intentionally sonic booming over major European cities to instill maximum terror. It touched down on the expansive lawns of the Palace of Nations in Geneva, crushing historic statues and scorching the pristine grass to ash. A heavy ramp lowered with a hydraulic hiss. Fleetmaster Valdir descended, flanked by a dozen heavily armored honor guards carrying massive, glowing plasma rifles. The aliens marched with the rigid, arrogant cadence of conquerors who had never known defeat. Waiting for them at the bottom of the ramp, completely unarmed, were Secretary Rachel Hughes and General William Graves. They stood behind a simple wooden table, upon which sat a single old-fashioned fountain pen and a printed copy of the Raelian Treaty. Behind the humans, a carefully curated selection of international press cameras rolled, broadcasting the historic surrender to the surviving global networks. Valdir stopped 10 paces from the table. His towering frame cast a long, dark shadow over the 2 human delegates. His obsidian eyes studied them, radiating contempt. "You show wisdom in your submission," Valdir's synthesized voice boomed across the silent lawn. "Many feral worlds choose to burn. You have chosen to serve. It is the logical path." "We are a practical people, Fleetmaster," Hughes said, her voice steady, betraying none of the absolute venom coursing through her veins. "But before we sign, we must clarify Section 4, Paragraph 9 of your treaty." Valdir's eyes narrowed slightly. "The treaty is not subject to negotiation, human." "It's not a negotiation." Graves stepped forward, his hands clasped casually behind his back. "It's a clarification. The section detailing resource management and population equilibrium." Our translators struggled with the phrasing. "It appears to suggest you intend to execute 50% of our global population." Valdir let out a sound that translated as a low, mechanical hum, a Raelian scoff. "It does not suggest it. It mandates it," Valdir stated bluntly, loud enough for the world's cameras to hear. "Your species breeds like parasites. You consume resources at a rate that is mathematically abhorrent. To efficiently serve the Ascendancy, your numbers must be purged. The elderly, the sick, and the defiant will be vaporized immediately following the signing. Do not look so horrified, primitives. We are doing you a favor. We are pruning a dying tree." Valdir gestured to the pen on the table. "Sign, or we will begin the purge from orbit, and we will not stop at 50%. The silence in Geneva was absolute. The wind seemed to hold its breath. The alien honor guards tightened their grips on their plasma rifles, expecting the humans to weep, to beg, to fall to their knees in despair. Instead, General William Graves did something that completely shattered the tension. He chuckled. It wasn't a nervous laugh. It wasn't a hysterical giggle of a man driven mad by despair. It was a deep, resonant, genuine chuckle of profound amusement. It was the laugh of a chess grandmaster watching an opponent confidently step directly into a glaringly obvious trap. Fleetmaster Valdir's posture stiffened. The translation software in his earpiece struggled to contextualize the auditory input. You express amusement? You face the annihilation of half your species, and you make sounds of joy? Graves stopped laughing, though a harsh, mocking smile remained etched onto his weathered face. He looked up at the towering alien, his eyes boring into the obsidian pools. I'm laughing, Valdir, because I just realized something incredibly sad, Graves said, his voice dropping the diplomatic formalities entirely. You actually believe you're the apex predators of this universe. You've been flying around in your shiny, inefficient ships, bullying peaceful colonies and primitive tribes for so long that you forgot what a real fight looks like. Valdir snarled, taking a threatening step forward. Insolent meat! My armada holds your planet hostage. I have enough plasma firepower in orbit to turn your atmosphere to glass. Yes, you do, Secretary Hughes interjected, leaning casually against the wooden table. But here's the problem with plasma, Fleet Master. It's hot, it's slow, and it requires a massive, unshielded magnetic projection matrix to fire. A matrix that our scientists at Lockheed and DARPA mapped perfectly 36 hours ago. Valdir looked between the two humans, a flicker of genuine confusion finally piercing his arrogant facade. What are you talking about? I'm talking about the fact that your species got FTL travel too early, Graves said, his voice turning ice cold. You skipped the hard parts. You didn't spend 3,000 years fighting ground wars, trench wars, and cyber wars. You never had to invent stealth technology because you relied on brute force. You never developed kinetic shielding because nobody in your quadrant was crazy enough to throw solid metal at a fraction of the speed of light. Graves slowly reached into his uniform pocket. The alien honor guards instantly raised their rifles, the weapons whining as they charged. Graves ignored them, pulling out an old analog silver pocket watch. He checked the time. You see, Valdir, Graves continued softly, Earth is a death world. We didn't unite in peace and harmony. We united because we got exceedingly good at killing, and we finally ran out of ways to kill each other safely. When you showed up and told us to dismantle our military, you didn't disarm us. You just gave the most paranoid, heavily armed species in the galaxy a common enemy. Enough of this babble, Valdir roared, raising his hand to signal his ship. Commander Tarlok, initiate orbital bombardment. Burn their capitals to ash. Valdir waited for the blinding flash of plasma from the sky. Nothing happened. Valdir tapped his earpiece frantically. Tarlok, respond! Fire the main batteries! Only the gentle rustling of the Geneva wind answered him. Graves clicked his pocket watch shut and slipped it back into his uniform. Tarlok can't hear you, Fleet Master. Your communication network operates on unencrypted, analog broadwave frequencies. Honestly, it was embarrassing. Some teenagers in an MIT dorm room could have hacked it, but we let Cyber Command have the honors. They locked your flagship's targeting computers in a recursive diagnostic loop 20 minutes ago. Valdir's obsidian eyes widened in a sudden, terrifying realization. He looked up at the sky. You bluff, the alien hissed, though his voice lacked its previous thunder. Our shields are impenetrable. Against lasers and plasma? Sure. Hughes smiled grimly. But we don't use plasma. We use math and gravity. Graves pulled a secure satellite phone from his belt. He pressed a single, physical red button on the keypad. Project Zeus, Graves said into the receiver. Rain. High above the Earth's atmosphere, the dead space debris woke up. 600 heavily armored stealth satellites, positioned perfectly over the Raelian Armada, opened their payload bays. Inside the Raelian flagship, Commander Tarlok was screaming at his technicians as their consoles sparked and rebooted endlessly. Why are the comms down? Why is the radar blind? Sir, a technician shrieked, looking through a localized optical telescope. Inbound projectiles! Coming from the planet's orbit! Raise magnetic shields. Shields are up, sir! But the projectiles, they have no energy signature. They are solid matter. It was a fundamental law of physics that Sir Isaac Newton was the deadliest son of a bitch in space. A 20-foot-long tungsten rod, dropping from orbit, requires no explosive payload. By the time it clears the exosphere, it is traveling at Mach 10. The first tungsten rod struck a Raelian cruiser hovering over the Atlantic. The alien's magnetic shield, designed to disperse superheated gas, simply didn't register the dense, uncharged metal spike. The rod punched through the shield as if it wasn't there, tearing through the heavily armored dorsal hull, obliterating the ship's main fusion core and exiting out the bottom in a fraction of a second. From the ground, it looked like a streak of pure white lightning struck the alien vessel. A heartbeat later, the massive cruiser detonated from the inside out, blooming into a silent, brilliant supernova of expanding gas and shattered metal high in the upper atmosphere. Down in Geneva, Valdir flinched as a new star briefly illuminated the daytime sky. "That was one of your escort cruisers," Graves noted clinically, pointing up. "We have 3,000 more tungsten rods currently in freefall, locked onto the exact coordinates of your remaining ships." Panic raw, unfiltered, biological panic finally seized Fleetmaster Valdir. He lunged forward, grabbing General Graves by the collar of his uniform with terrifying strength, lifting the human off the ground. The alien guards raised their weapons, ready to slaughter the human delegation. "Call them off!" Valdir roared, his composed facade entirely shattered, spittle flying from his lips. "Stop the strike or you die right now." Graves, dangling an inch off the grass, didn't struggle. He simply looked Valdir dead in the eyes and smiled, a feral, terrifying grin that sent a shiver down the alien's spine. "Kill me," Graves whispered harshly. "Do it. But know this, Valdir. If my heart stops, the dead man's switch in my chest activates the second wave. We don't just have orbital kinetics. We have stealth-coated nuclear torpedoes aimed at the exact gravitational anchor points of your ships. You pull that trigger, and your entire fleet becomes a radioactive artificial reef." Valdir's hands trembled. He looked at Hughes, who was already holding a specialized military-grade pistol, aimed calmly at the center of Valdir's forehead. He looked at the sky, where a second, third, and fourth Raelian ship suddenly blossomed into fiery ruin as the invisible kinetic rain continued to fall. They had come to subjugate a primitive, helpless world. They had completely failed to realize that they had just kicked open the door to the most violent, paranoid, and technologically cunning asylum in the known universe. Slowly, his pride crumbling to ash, Valdir released Graves. The general smoothed his uniform jacket, completely unbothered. "Now," Graves said, gesturing to the useless treaty on the table, "you're going to tell your ships to stand down, power off their weapons, and surrender their navigation data. We're going to take your technology, Valdir. We're going to reverse engineer your FTL drives." And then Graves leaned in, his voice dropping to a deadly whisper. "We are going to pay a visit to the Raelian Ascendancy, and we are going to show you what a real predator looks like." The skies over Earth remained clear, save for the massive, scarred hulks of the Raelian Ascendancy's decimated fleet. Following the devastating kinetic bombardment from Project Zeus, the surviving alien vessels had immediately powered down their primary fusion drives. Fleetmaster Valdir's unconditional surrender at the Palace of Nations had been broadcasted on every surviving global network, fundamentally altering the trajectory of human history. The immediate aftermath was a frenzy of unprecedented global cooperation. The United Nations Security Council, effectively dissolved in practice, was replaced by the Terran Defense Coalition. General William Graves stood on the observation deck of the newly christened Orbital Station Alpha, formerly the Raelian flagship. The vessel had been boarded, pacified, and seized by elite units from the United States Naval Special Warfare Command and the British Special Air Service within hours of the surrender. The alien crew, paralyzed by a mixture of shock and biological panic at the sheer aggression of human boarding parties, offered zero resistance. They were currently being processed in highly secure subterranean detainment facilities managed by the Department of Defense in Nevada. "It is still difficult to comprehend," General Secretary of Defense Rachel Hughes said, stepping up beside Graves. She held a sleek, heavily encrypted tablet displaying streams of logistical data. "The sheer scale of their incompetence. We have teams from Lockheed Martin, General Electric, and Boston Dynamics tearing through their engineering bays right now. Their metallurgical sciences are millennia ahead of ours, but their application of basic defensive doctrines is practically non-existent." Graves nodded, staring out the thick, transparent aluminum viewport at the blue curve of Earth. "They never had to adapt, Rachel. When you possess a hammer that can shatter planets, you treat every problem like a nail. They never expected the nail to strike back with kinetic tungsten. How goes the reverse engineering of their faster-than-light propulsion?" Hughes tapped her screen, bringing up a live video feed from deep within the bowels of the alien flagship. "Doctor, Simon Cole, DARPA's lead astrophysicist, was standing before a massive, pulsating core of iridescent violet energy. He was flanked by a dozen heavily armed Space Force operators and several engineers wearing hazmat suits adorned with the NASA insignia. Dr. Cole believes he has cracked the foundational mechanics of their FTL, Hughes reported. And in true human fashion, he is simultaneously terrified and insulted by it. The audio channel linked to Dr. Cole crackled to life. General Graves, Secretary Hughes, I hope you are seeing this. The Ascendancy doesn't use a localized wormhole or a hyperspace slipstream. They utilize a crude brute force manipulation of the Alcubierre warp metric. They are essentially folding spacetime by dumping raw, unrefined fusion plasma into a synthetic exotic matter matrix. Translate that into infantry terms, Simon, Graves commanded, his eyes narrowing at the glowing violet core. It means they are driving a cosmic muscle car with zero safety features, Cole explained, his voice echoing in the vast engineering bay. They achieve a negative energy density to contract space ahead of the vessel and expand it behind. The math behind their space-time distortion is surprisingly primitive. Cole pulled up a digital whiteboard on the feed, rapidly writing out the underlying mechanics. To maintain the warp bubble, their core calculates the required energy distribution using a rudimentary stress-energy tensor. If we look at their operational baseline, it maps closely to $T, mu, nu equals frac, c, 4/8 pi g, left r, mu, nu, frac 1/2, r, g, mu, nu, right plus lambda, g, mu, nu. However, their modulation is completely static. They don't account for quantum fluctuations in the vacuum of space. They just brute force the energy output to compensate for the drag. It is incredibly inefficient and highly volatile. Can we replicate it? Hughes asked, getting straight to the point. Replicate it? Madam Secretary, we can drastically improve it, Cole grinned, wiping a smudge of grease from his cheek. Blue Origin and SpaceX engineers are already collaborating on a scaled-down prototype. By integrating our advanced polymorphic algorithms and AI-driven fluid dynamics modeling, we can stabilize the exotic matter matrix. We can make their FTL drives faster, quieter, and infinitely more precise. Furthermore, we are finding that their power grid can be seamlessly adapted to power directed energy weapons. We are mounting experimental naval railguns to their chassis, powered directly by their own fusion reactors. Graves turned away from the viewport, a grim satisfaction settling over his features. They brought us an invasion fleet. We are going to turn it into an armada. What is the status of our distinguished prisoner? Hughes swiped her tablet, changing the feed to a sterile, white-walled interrogation room deep beneath the Nevada desert. Fleet Master Valder sat at a reinforced steel table, his once gleaming ceremonial armor stripped away, replaced by a drab orange jumpsuit. He looked haggard, his pale, iridescent gray skin losing its luster. Valder has been surprisingly cooperative, Hughes noted dryly. Once the psychological shock of his defeat set in, his inherent subservience to a superior predator took over. Raelian culture is strictly hierarchical. By defeating him, you effectively became his new pack leader, general. He has provided us with the complete navigational charts of the Ascendancy, including the exact coordinates of their core worlds, their primary shipyards, and their capital, Rael Prime. Excellent, Graves said, his voice dropping to a dangerous timbre. The Raelians built an empire on the assumption that the galaxy was soft. They believed that because they discovered exotic matter, they owned the stars. They are about to learn a very painful lesson about human industrial capacity. We are not just going to defend Earth, Rachel. We are going to secure our quadrant. For the next 18 months, Earth became a planet possessed. The remnants of international squabbling evaporated, replaced by a unified, hyper-focused, militarized economy. The orbital shipyards operated around the clock, bathing the night sky in the silent, bright flashes of zero-gravity welding. The captured Raelian vessels were stripped to their superstructures and rebuilt. Human engineers ripped out the inefficient alien point defense arrays and replaced them with synchronized, AI-controlled phalanx CIWS batteries and high-velocity railguns. The sleek, elegant alien hulls were suddenly bristling with the brutal, utilitarian aesthetics of human warfare. They were no longer exploration vessels or intimidation platforms. They were apex warships, forged in the crucible of a death world. 2 years and 4 months after the skies above Earth first darkened, the void of space tore open once again. But this time, the tear did not occur over the Pacific Ocean. It occurred deep in the heart of the Raelian Ascendancy, in the highly secure, heavily trafficked sector of space orbiting Rael Prime. Rael Prime was a world of breathtaking, artificial beauty. Its surface was completely encased in shimmering crystalline cities that spanned continents, glowing with the soft, arrogant light of a civilization that had not known conflict in 10,000 years. A massive defensive ring, bristling with super-heavy plasma batteries and thousands of automated defense drones, encircled the planet. Inside the central command spire of the planetary defense grid, Supreme Executor Corvin was reviewing routine tithe reports from subjugated vassal worlds. The atmosphere in the command center was relaxed, almost lethargic. Suddenly, the primary sensor array screamed a high-pitched alarm that hadn't been heard since the conclusion of the Unification Wars. "Executor!" a frantic technician shouted, his hands hovering uselessly over his console. "Massive spatial anomalies detected on the edge of the system. Gravitational waves are off the charts. Something is tearing through the fabric of real space." Corvin stood up, his dark eyes narrowing. "A localized spatial storm? Divert power to the orbital shielding." "It is not a storm, sir. It is a fleet. They are exiting FTL directly inside our defensive perimeter." The concept was absurd. Raelian FTL drives required days of deceleration on the outskirts of a solar system to prevent the catastrophic discharge of exotic radiation. Dropping out of FTL directly into planetary orbit was considered mathematically impossible. It would rip a ship to pieces. Yet, the impossible was materializing right before their eyes. Space shuddered and tore violently. Out of the swirling, chaotic vortex of negative energy emerged the Terran Defense Coalition's first fleet. At its vanguard was the UNS Retribution, a heavily modified Raelian dreadnought that had been painted a matte, radar-absorbent black. It bristled with kinetic launch tubes, railgun batteries, and heavy nuclear payload bays. Behind it followed 50 more human-retrofitted warships, their engines burning with a clean, stabilized blue fire that contrasted sharply with the sickly violet of standard Raelian tech. "Identify them!" Corvan commanded, his voice trembling as he stared at the tactical display. "Sir, their energy signatures match Fleet Master Valdir's Lost Armada," the technician whispered in sheer terror. "But their drive emissions are stabilized. Their armor density is fluctuating. They are targeting our orbital defense ring." Before Corvin could issue a counterorder, the human fleet demonstrated why they had not merely copied alien technology, but fundamentally weaponized it. The UNS Retribution did not fire plasma, it did not fire lasers. Instead, the dreadnought utilized Dr. Cole's refined FTL mechanics. It projected a micro-warp bubble around a solid 2-ton slug of depleted uranium, accelerating the projectile to 99.9% the speed of light for a fraction of a second. The relativistic kill vehicle struck the primary control node of the Raelian orbital defense ring. There was no explosion. There was simply a blinding flash of pure kinetic energy transfer. A massive section of the shimmering, invincible defense ring instantly vaporized into a cloud of superheated atomic dust. The shockwave shattered every window in the command spire on the planet's surface, plunging the capital city into chaos. The human fleet systematically dismantled the rest of the orbital defenses in less than 4 minutes. They fired in perfect AI-coordinated volleys, using kinetic force to bypass the aliens' magnetic shielding entirely. The automated Raelian drones, programmed to intercept plasma signatures, completely ignored the cold, dark tungsten rods and railgun slugs until they were shredded into scrap metal. Complete, overwhelming dominance. The human fleet halted its advance, settling into a low, menacing orbit directly above the planetary capital. The UNS Retribution positioned itself directly over the Supreme Executor's spire, casting a massive, terrifying shadow over the crystalline city. On the command deck of the Retribution, General William Graves stood tall in his charcoal gray dress uniform. Secretary Rachel Hughes stood beside him, a cold, triumphant smile playing on her lips. "Their planetary defenses are neutralized, General," Captain Sarah Jenkins reported from the helm. "We have full orbital superiority. All nuclear payloads are armed and locked onto their major population centers. We await your command. Open a broadband. Unencrypted frequency to the planetary surface, Graves ordered, his voice echoing in the quiet hum of the bridge. Let's make sure everyone down there hears this. Down on Rael Prime, every screen, every holographic billboard, and every personal communication device was forcibly hijacked. The sleek, elegant broadcasts of the Ascendancy were replaced by the harsh, high-definition image of General William Graves. Supreme Executor Corvan watched the massive display in his shattered command center, his breath hitching in his throat. He recognized the creature on the screen. It was a human. One of the primitives Valdir had been sent to conquer. Inhabitants of Rael Prime. Leaders of the Ascendancy, Graves spoke, his voice carrying the deep, unforgiving gravity of Earth. I am General William Graves of the Terran Defense Coalition. 2 years ago, you sent an armada to our home. You threatened us with extinction. You demanded our subservience, our resources, and our lives. Graves paused, letting the silence hang over the terrified alien world. You made a fatal miscalculation, Graves continued. You mistook our lack of interstellar travel for weakness. You assumed that because we were confined to a single rock, we were defenseless. You failed to realize that while you spent the last 10 millennia growing fat and complacent on the labor of subjugated worlds, humanity spent its entire existence perfecting the art of survival. Graves leaned closer to the camera, his eyes burning with an intense, predatory fire. We are not here to eradicate you, though we easily could. We are not here to strip mine your oceans or vaporize your citizens, because unlike you, we are not butchers. But make no mistake, the old order of this galaxy is dead. Secretary Hughes stepped into the frame, holding up a physical, paper document. It was a heavily revised version of the treaty Valdir had presented in Geneva. This is the Treaty of Sol, Hughes stated, her voice slicing through the air like a scalpel. You will immediately recall all your occupation fleets from every vassal world in your empire. You will dismantle your offensive military capabilities. You will pay heavy technological and resource reparations to Earth and the Terran Defense Coalition. In exchange, we will allow your government to exist, and we will offer you our protection from whatever else is hiding in the dark corners of this universe. Hughes lowered the document, staring directly into the camera. You have exactly 1 orbital cycle to sign, Hughes said coldly. Resistance will result in the immediate kinetic bombardment of your planetary infrastructure. You poked the bear, Ascendancy. Now, you will learn to live in its shadow. The broadcast terminated, leaving the glittering cities of Rael Prime in stunned, terrified silence. Above them, the human dreadnoughts waited patiently, their cold, dark weapons firmly locked onto the heart of an empire that had just realized it was no longer the apex predator. Humanity had not just survived the storm, they had become it. If you loved this thrilling dive into humanity's ultimate triumph over arrogant alien forces, do not forget to smash that like button. We release brand new, high-octane sci-fi stories every week, so share this video with your fellow science fiction fans to help our channel grow. Hit subscribe and ring the notification bell to ensure you never miss out on our epic galactic adventures. What should humanity conquer next? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below.